Howdy everybody, welcome back for another lesson. This time we're going to talk about the CAGED system. So the CAGED system is something that sometimes can be confusing for guitar players out there, and it's a pretty useful system to understand, as basically everything we do on the guitar fits into the CAGED system somehow. Now, I'm not a person who's militant about, you have to do things according to the CAGED system, you have to learn your scales according to it. It's just that, as I said before, things just naturally fall into the CAGED system. So having an understanding of it is going to help you visualize things on the fretboard and get your head around playing in more keys and playing in more positions than just probably like your standard E box like this. So CAGED is just an acronym, and it refers to the open position or cowboy chords that we use all the time. So we have a C, we have an A, we have a G, we have an E, we have a D. And it's not referring to any particular harmonic quality of those chords. So it could be a C minor chord, it could be a C7 chord, it could be a C major chord. It's just that region and it's that shape which you can then alter. And out of these chords come scales. Essentially you have an arpeggio, which is 3 or more notes, 3, often sort of 4 if we're thinking in terms of blues and jazz. And a scale has 7 notes, so then all you got to do is just fill in the extra 3 notes, and then you have a scale, and you can mix them around any way you like. That's the way I think of scales anyway, rather than getting so caught up in harmonic minor, melodic minor, Locrian, and then all the modes and everything. So if we think about just the key of E, many of us are going to be playing blueses in the key of E. Let's just look at the different positions that we have in E. There are 5 of them. The first one here, I'm just going to use major chords just for consistency here. We have E using an E box for obvious reasons. Incidentally, when you play up here, like say an A major bar chord, that is also using an E box, but we have to refinger it because it's a bar chord now. Now the next box up in the key of E would be using the D position, which is this one here. And it's called a D position because we're essentially just playing a D major chord and we're barring. I don't often use this fingering to play chords. Sometimes I might go, if I was playing a funk song, but generally I see this more as a place I can derive scales and arpeggios from. That's its real use, to me at least. The next one in the key of E would be this one here. Now this is a C shape. You can see C major, move it up to here. It could be minor, it could be dominant 7th if you want it to be. And there are scales here. Or pentatonic. The next one up from here would be an A box. Again, we're still in the key of E, and it's called an A box because we're playing an A major chord. And then last but not least is all the way up here. This is quite an awkward fingering to play as a chord, which is why it's not often used for rhythm playing, but it's your G box. See, it's a G. And again, I don't often use this to play chords. I might use that part of it for the Keith Richards vibe, or if I was doing a funk thing again. But again, I see it as a place where I can derive arpeggios and scales for improvising. And when I'm playing blues, I draw from the pentatonic boxes in all of these different positions, and it can link up the fretboard. So I'll give you an example. If we just play pentatonics ascending. That's it. And the next one, this is the D box, still in the key of E, but now the C box in the key of E. Now the A box in the key of E. And then the G box in the key of E. And then you get back to E. For those of you who are big Joe Bonamassa fans, I mean, who isn't? He uses a lot of this when he's doing his classic pentatonic scale sequences, which is also a thing that Eric Johnson is, probably credited for being the first proponent of. And once you know your pentatonic boxes in the different positions, it might take a couple of weeks to memorize, but it's well worth doing because it opens up the fretboard. All you have to do is just come up with some sequences, like these short melodic ideas that you repeat either down in increments or up, and then you can link up those boxes. I'll do some videos on this thing a bit later, but this is the introduction to this sort of concept. I'll just give you an example. Change position, change position, change position. That's a way that you can get down the fretboard really, really quickly. For those of you who've seen my videos on playing over altered dominants, I have largely been deriving all of my examples out of the E position, right? But I urge you to come up with ideas in all of these different positions. Those examples in those videos were in the key of A. But if you're going to be playing a blues, for example, and you didn't want to move up and down the fretboard in the same box, which can sound, it's good as an idea that you use occasionally, but you don't want it to be a habit, because the voice leading is interrupted and it can sound a bit clunky at times. You want to find where these different boxes are near the chord you're already playing for consistency in your line. So if we were looking again at the key of E, I can play an E here using the C shape. Now if I go to my chord 4, which would be an A, the nearest A is right at the 5th fret using the E shape. Then I would go back to my E using the C shape, and then chord 5 would be a B. Now if I don't want to move at all, then I could just use the G shape. So if I was going to be playing, say, largely pentatonic blues licks, but targeting notes of the chord, so I am moving with the chord, I would set myself an example, or more an exercise really, to stay in one position. You don't have to do this when you're playing live, okay? But in order to really thoroughly understand different regions of the fretboard, I used to set myself parameters when I was practicing. Like, I'd put on a backing track and I would say, I'm not allowed to play anything outside of this position for 20 minutes. And I would just exhaust every possibility. And after, a fortnight, 2 weeks, you really get to know that position. And then you do it in the next position. So for example, if you're playing a blues up here, your chord 1 would be an E using an A shape. Your chord 4 would be an A using a D shape. And your chord 5 would be a B using your E shape. If you did it up here, chord 1 E would be using a G shape. Chord 4 A would be using a C shape. Chord 5 B would be using a D shape. And it's good to just work these out. Up here, same as open position. E is an E shape, A is an A shape, and then B. The B shape is actually a form of a C shape. We've just moved it down a semitone and we have some open strings. So that one can be confusing, that people sometimes think, oh, it's a B7 shape, but it really is a hybrid of an A shape and a C shape. Similar to an F shape, when people say, oh, I'm playing an F shape. An F shape is just the upper structure of an E shape in its bar chord form. You can call it an F shape if you want, but really that's where it comes from. So everything on the guitar can be played within these positions. They can be major or minor. They're just regions of a fretboard that you need to understand. So if we looked here at this A shape in the key of E still, we've got our major shape. It could be a minor shape. It could be a dominant 7 shape. And we've got all of our scales there. When you're holding down a chord position, what you want to try and visualize is where all the notes of the scale are. So if I'm holding this minor shape, I can see that I'm already holding the fundamental notes in that chord, which are also going to be the fundamental backbone notes of the scale. I've got my tonic here, the 3rd would be there. Then we have the 4th, then we go to the 5th, which I'm already playing. Then I'd have the flat 7, which if it's a minor 7 chord, I'm already voicing. Then back to the tonic. Then to the 9th again, then the 3rd. So So when I'm thinking, I don't really consciously think I'm going to play an arpeggio now, I'm going to play a scale. It's all the same thing to me now. I just hear lines in the key of E. Some of those notes are the really critical notes of the chord tones. And I think after years of just studying music and being raised by two music teachers, I've just sort of heard that sound, so I naturally end my lines most of the time on chord tones, but I don't think about it like an intellectual exercise. Having said that, when I practiced, and still do practice, I work on things like this so I can visualize, so I know where I'm going back to. You can play in all 12 keys in one position or a 1 to 2 fret span using these CAGED position things, which is really liberating because a lot of the time we think of the fretboard in a horizontal sense, but when you can start seeing keys and chords and scales vertically, then that's when you start to get in the territory of jazz guitarists where, you know, like what I was talking about going in blues, is you don't have to just go. You could enter C using an A position. So if you looked at it here, for example, you have, this is an A using an E shape. Then we could go to a D for going up in fourths. This is a D using an A shape. If we go in fourths, we would get to a G using a D shape. Then from there it would be a C using a G shape. From there it would be an F using a C shape. Then from there it would be a B flat using an E shape. Then we go to an E flat using an A shape. Then we would go to an A flat using a D shape. Then from there we would go to a D flat using a G shape. Then we go to a G flat using a C shape. Then we would go to a B using an E shape. Then we would go to an E using an A shape. And then we would go to an A using a D shape. We've gone through all 12 keys. That's all 12 keys in one position without having to move extensively. When you can visualize that stuff, big changes start to happen in your playing. The confidence that you get from, you know, looking at this guitar and it making sense. You know, very often we look at it and it almost looks like a fence on a farm where you got like posts and like, you know, wires to keep cattle out, but you can actually see regions of the fretboard in different keys. So a good example to give you to work on would just be to pick a key, you know, each day, and then try and find the position. So, you know, it might be B flat, for example, and start low and go high. B flat using an A shape, B flat using a G shape, B flat using an E shape, B flat using a D shape, B flat using a C shape, B flat using an A shape, B flat using a G shape, B flat using an E shape, and then we kind of run out, but it would be a D up there. And the more you do it, the better it gets. It's like learning how to spell, or you know, anything similar to that. You know, if you work on the muscle, it gets stronger, you get better at it. So if you have any questions about this stuff, please send me a message. Share this video with anyone you think might benefit from it, or is having issues understanding the CAGED system. As I said, it's not something I consciously think about, but I'm aware that everything I play can be put into one of these 5 categories. And when you have that light bulb moment, it can really help your playing. And more than anything else, you're thinking about the guitar. You know, your fingers don't have a mind of themselves. Everything has to come from upstairs. So I hope this has been useful. And if there are any other techniques or concepts that you want me to cover, shoot me a message and I'll try and do a video on it just to help demystify some things on the guitar. All right, take it easy.